There's a moment that happens in many homes without anyone talking about it. A man walks toward the staircase he has climbed for 30 years. Same carpet, same wooden railing, same 12 steps leading upstairs. And yet, just before he lifts his foot, he pauses. Not because of pain, not because he feels dizzy, not even because he feels tired. It lasts maybe 1 second, 2 at most. A quiet hesitation that even he barely notices, as though the body is waiting for a signal, as though something inside him wants one extra moment before movement begins. Then he climbs the stairs normally, slowly, carefully, without thinking much about it afterward. But these small pauses often arrive long before people realize something deeper has changed. Sometimes the body pauses, long before we realize the mind has become less connected to movement. And what makes this so strange is how familiar it feels once someone points it out. Because many older adults have experienced moments exactly like this: standing before stairs, slowing before stepping off a curb, touching a wall while turning around, looking down while walking through a crowded place, not out of fear, not out of weakness, just differently than before. You don't feel weaker at first. It changes quietly. And for many people, the shift is not really about muscles or aging in the dramatic way people imagine. It is often about rhythm, the natural conversation between attention and movement, the effortless coordination the brain once handled in the background without asking permission. When we are younger, the body moves almost ahead of thought. We turn, step, reach, adjust, balance. Thousands of tiny corrections happen automatically. The brain stays active through coordination, not intensity. And many of those connections are maintained through ordinary movements repeated every day. Walking through the kitchen while carrying groceries, turning quickly when someone calls your name, stepping onto a sidewalk without looking down, climbing stairs while thinking about something completely unrelated. The body remembers repetition, not exercise alone, not strength alone. Repetition. And over time, many people do not suddenly lose those abilities. They simply stop challenging them in small ways. Life becomes more careful, more predictable, less responsive. And slowly, hesitation replaces rhythm. That is one reason stairs matter more than people realize. Stairs are not just steps. They are quiet conversations between the brain and the body. They ask the body to shift weight. They ask the eyes to judge distance. They ask balance to adjust continuously. They ask attention to stay present. And perhaps most importantly, they ask movement to remain connected to awareness. That connection matters more than many people think. Not because someone is trying to become athletic, not because they need intense training, but because the mind stays engaged when movement still asks something from it. If you are someone who cares about healthy aging and understanding the quiet changes that happen inside the body over time, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel if this conversation helps you in some way. Sometimes the smallest observations lead to the deepest understanding. And many of the changes people notice after 60 are not loud changes. They are subtle, a fraction slower, a little more cautious. A tiny pause where rhythm once existed naturally. One of the first places many people notice this is at the bottom of a staircase. Harold noticed it one winter morning while carrying laundry upstairs. He was 72 years old and had spent most of his life working as a carpenter. For decades, his body moved confidently. He climbed ladders, balanced on unfinished floors, stepped across beams without hesitation. Even after retirement, he still fixed shelves around the house and built small wooden planters for neighbors. But one morning, standing near the stairs with a basket against his hip, he realized something unusual. He stopped before taking the first step. Not dramatically. No pain shot through his knees. Nothing felt unstable. But his body waited, almost as though it needed confirmation before continuing. He climbed the stairs slowly afterward, and forgot about it until it happened again the next day. Then again the following week. Eventually he noticed something deeper. It was not the stairs themselves, it was the transition, the moment between standing still and beginning movement. That moment had become less automatic, and this happens quietly for many seniors. The brain once predicted movement effortlessly, but when coordination is used less dynamically over time, the body sometimes asks for more conscious attention before moving. It was never about strength alone. The body may still be capable, but the smoothness between intention and action changes, especially in movements involving balance and elevation. Harold later realized he had slowly stopped moving in varied ways after retirement. He no longer climbed ladders, no longer carried awkward objects, no longer adjusted his footing constantly throughout the day. His world became flatter, more stable, more predictable, and the brain adapts to whatever it repeats most often. That is one reason small hesitations appear, not because the body has failed, but because coordination becomes less practiced. You don't notice it all at once. It changes quietly. One thing that helped Harold was surprisingly simple. He began paying attention to the rhythm of his steps instead of rushing through them, not exercising, not counting, just noticing. Left foot, shift, right foot, lift. He said the staircase began to feel less like an obstacle and more like something his body remembered again. And maybe that is what many people need most. Not pressure, not fear, just renewed awareness. Sometimes the body only wants the mind to participate again. Another quiet pause often appears when stepping down from a curb. Evelyn noticed this while leaving a grocery store one afternoon. She was 68 and had worked as an elementary school teacher for more than 40 years. She had always moved quickly. Even in retirement, she stayed busy, volunteering, walking through farmers' markets, meeting friends for coffee. But that afternoon, while approaching the parking lot curb, she slowed unexpectedly. People behind her continued walking normally, but she stopped for a brief moment before stepping down. It surprised her because the curb was not high, and she was not afraid of falling, at least not consciously. Still, something inside her wanted extra time. Later that evening, she thought about it again. She realized she had started doing this more often, especially in unfamiliar places. The brain depends heavily on prediction during movement. When younger, the body constantly calculates distance, balance, and timing without needing deliberate focus. But with age, many people begin relying more heavily on visual confirmation. That is why some seniors begin looking directly at curbs, stairs, or uneven ground more often than before. The movement no longer feels completely automatic. The mind becomes more involved in monitoring each transition. And slowly, confidence changes. Not dramatically, just subtly. Evelyn later admitted something important. She had stopped walking in busy environments as often after retirement. Her daily routes became familiar, predictable, simple. And although routine can feel comforting, the brain stays responsive when the body keeps adapting in small ways. The mind likes variation, tiny adjustments, moments that require gentle coordination. One thing Evelyn began doing helped more than she expected. When walking outside, she stopped staring only at the ground. Instead, she occasionally lifted her eyes and noticed the environment around her while continuing to walk carefully. Trees moving in the wind, store signs, passing conversations. This small shift encouraged her body to trust movement more naturally again. Because walking is not just about feet, it is also about orientation, attention, confidence, and the relationship between movement and awareness. Sometimes people think caution alone keeps them safe, but too much caution can slowly disconnect rhythm from movement. And once rhythm disappears, even simple motions begin to feel uncertain. Another small change appears during turning, especially quick turning. Martha discovered this in her kitchen one evening while cooking soup. She was 76 years old, widowed, and had spent most of her adult life caring for her family. For years, she moved through her kitchen effortlessly, turning from stove to counter, opening cabinets while carrying dishes, reaching for ingredients without thinking. But one evening, while turning to place a bowl on the table, Her hand reached toward the wall automatically. It happened so quickly she barely noticed. A light touch. Nothing dramatic. Yet afterward she realized she had started doing this often. Touching furniture while turning, resting fingertips on counters, pausing slightly before changing direction. Not because she felt weak, because turning no longer felt completely effortless. Many movements inside the home involve hidden coordination. Turning is one of them. The brain must process shifting weight, body position, balance, and direction simultaneously. When those adjustments are practiced regularly, movement feels fluid. But when movement becomes more cautious and repetitive over time, turning sometimes becomes less instinctive. And slowly, hesitation replaces rhythm. Martha later realized something else. After her husband passed away, her world had become quieter, smaller. She moved less dynamically because there was less reason to hurry, less unpredictability, less interaction between attention and movement. That is something many people never consider. The brain stays active through coordination, not intensity. Not every important movement is large. Some of the most meaningful ones are tiny adjustments repeated throughout ordinary life. One small habit began helping Martha reconnect with movement again. Whenever she turned around inside the house, she quietly noticed where her weight shifted. Heel, hip, shoulder, not analyzing, not correcting, just noticing. She said it made her feel present inside her body again instead of simply moving automatically. And presence matters. Because many seniors do not lose confidence suddenly. They slowly lose trust in movements that once required no attention at all. Another subtle hesitation appears after standing up, especially during the first few steps. Leon noticed this after getting out of his favorite chair each morning. He was 74 and had spent 30 years driving long-distance trucks across the country. Movement had always been connected to purpose for him. Schedules, stops, routes, loading docks. Even retirement did not slow his personality. But his body had changed in a quieter way. When he stood up, he often remained still for a second before walking. Then the first few steps felt oddly uncertain. Not painful, not weak, just disconnected. Almost as though his legs needed time to remember the rhythm of walking. This happens to many people more often than they realize. Movement initiation is deeply connected to coordination between attention and motion. When younger, the transition from sitting to walking happens instantly. The body predicts balance before movement begins. But with aging, especially during more sedentary years, those transitions sometimes become less smooth. Again, not because someone is incapable, but because movement becomes less continuous throughout the day. The body remembers repetition. Leon admitted something important. Since retirement, he spent long hours sitting, watching television, reading, resting. Entire afternoons passed without much varied movement, and slowly, his body stopped expecting frequent transitions. One tiny change helped him more than he expected. Before taking his first steps after standing, he began noticing the feeling of his feet against the floor. Noticing pressure, weight distribution, contact. Just for a moment. Then walking naturally afterward. He said it reduced that strange, disconnected feeling between standing and moving. Because awareness itself can help reconnect rhythm. Sometimes people believe the solution must be intense or complicated, but the brain often responds to small moments of attention repeated consistently. That is how coordination survives, quietly, gradually, naturally. Another subtle sign appears in crowded places, especially when walking among other people. Diane noticed this at a community fair during the summer. She was 69, a retired nurse, and someone who had always remained socially active. But while moving through the crowd, she caught herself staring directly at her feet. Not occasionally, continuously. She realized she was monitoring every step, watching the ground, watching shoes, watching movement. By the time she looked up again, she felt mentally exhausted. This surprised her because She had always been confident in busy environments before. Crowded spaces ask the brain to process many things at once: direction, distance, speed, peripheral movement, balance. When younger, the brain handles much of this automatically. But over time, especially if environments become quieter and less stimulating, crowded movement may begin requiring more conscious attention. The mind becomes more protective, more focused on preventing mistakes, and gradually, movement loses some of its natural ease. You don't feel weaker at first, you simply feel more cautious. Diane later realized she had slowly withdrawn from busier places after retirement. Not intentionally. Life simply became calmer, but the brain stays responsive when the body keeps adapting in small ways. Adaptation matters, not intensity, not speed, just gentle responsiveness. One thing Diane began doing during walks helped her significantly. Every few minutes, she intentionally looked ahead at eye level instead of downward, not recklessly, still aware of the ground, but less fixated on it. She said the world felt more open afterward, less narrow, less mentally heavy, because confidence in movement is not only physical, it is also visual, spatial, attentive. The body and brain work together continuously while walking, and when attention becomes trapped in fear of missteps, movement often loses its natural rhythm. Sometimes the smallest act of looking forward changes how the entire body moves. The final quiet hesitation often appears while carrying objects, especially while moving at the same time. Samuel noticed this while watering plants in his backyard. He was 78 years old and had spent most of his life gardening professionally. He loved movement, not exercise, just activity with purpose. Lifting pots, carrying soil, walking through rows of flowers. But one morning, while carrying a watering can across the yard, he slowed dramatically before turning. He suddenly became very aware of the weight in his hands. His steps shortened. His body tightened slightly. And although nothing happened, the movement no longer felt effortless. Many seniors experience this without realizing why. Carrying objects changes balance subtly. The brain must continuously adjust posture, weight distribution, and direction simultaneously. When coordination remains active through daily life, these adjustments happen automatically. But when movements become more cautious and less varied over time, carrying objects while walking may begin demanding more attention. Samuel eventually realized something surprising. He had gradually stopped multitasking with movement. He would stand still before lifting, stand still before turning, stand still before reaching. His movements became separated instead of flowing together. And the brain adapts to that pattern. It was never about strength alone. It was about responsiveness. One tiny habit helped him reconnect with movement again. Whenever carrying something small, he began paying attention to how his body shifted while walking. Not correcting himself, just noticing. How the shoulders adjusted. How one foot pressed differently against the ground. How balance changed naturally. That awareness slowly restored confidence. Not perfectly, not instantly, but gently. And perhaps that is the most important thing many people misunderstand about aging. The body is not simply becoming weaker. Many changes involve communication, connection, responsiveness. The mind stays engaged when movement still asks something from it. That is why ordinary actions matter more than they appear to. Stairs, curbs, turning, walking, carrying, standing. These are not meaningless routines. They are opportunities for coordination to remain alive. And many older adults are far more capable than they realize. Sometimes they have simply become disconnected from movements that once happened automatically. The good news is that reconnection does not always require dramatic change. Often it begins with awareness. Tiny moments of presence repeated throughout ordinary days. Feeling your feet while walking through the kitchen. Noticing your rhythm while climbing stairs. Allowing your eyes to lift occasionally while moving outside. Recognizing how your weight shifts when turning. Paying attention to movement instead of rushing through it unconsciously. These are not exercises. They are conversations. Quiet conversations between the brain and the body. And those conversations matter. Because confidence in movement is built through tiny moments of coordination repeated daily. Many seniors do not lose sharpness suddenly. They slowly lose interaction between attention and movement. But interaction can return, gently, one small moment at a time. The body remembers repetition, and the brain continues adapting far longer than many people assume. Sometimes people become discouraged because they interpret hesitation as failure. But hesitation is often information, a signal, a request for reconnection, not defeat, not weakness, just awareness asking to participate again. And maybe that is why these pauses feel so emotional once we notice them, because they remind us that movement is not only physical, it is deeply connected to trust. Trust in balance, trust in rhythm, trust in the body's ability to respond naturally. When that trust changes, people often become quieter in their movements without fully understanding why. They take fewer risks, move more carefully, shrink their physical world little by little, and yet, many of those connections can still be nourished, not through force, not through fear, but through attention, through presence, through ordinary moments lived consciously again. The staircase inside a home may seem unimportant, but sometimes it reveals something meaningful, not decline, not failure, simply a quiet shift in how the brain and body communicate. And communication can improve when it is invited back consistently. That is why the smallest movements deserve respect, because the mind stays engaged when movement still asks something from it. And sometimes the people who age most gracefully are not the strongest people. They are the people who remain connected to their own movements, who continue noticing, adjusting, responding, participating, even gently, even slowly. So if you have noticed yourself pausing before certain movements lately, before stairs, before standing, before turning, before stepping into a busy place, please do not immediately assume something is wrong with you. Maybe your body is simply asking for more awareness. Maybe it wants rhythm again. Maybe it wants the mind involved again. And that is a very human thing, because the body does not betray us suddenly. Most changes arrive quietly, softly, gradually, but the brain can remain flexible when those small connections continue being used. Confidence in movement can still be nurtured, not through intensity, not through pressure, but through daily presence, tiny adjustments, small moments of coordination repeated over and over again. Maybe you are not losing as much as you thought. Maybe your body is simply waiting for conversation instead of autopilot. Have you ever noticed yourself pausing before certain movements without knowing why? If this video spoke to something you have quietly experienced, please share your thoughts in the comments. Your experience may help someone else feel less alone. And if you enjoyed this conversation, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who may need to hear it. Thank you sincerely for spending this time here today. Sometimes the smallest pause is not weakness. It's simply the body asking the mind to reconnect.